Yeah. This is another story about dogs. For the dog that don't pee on trees is a snip. So says Snoop Dogg. So get your pooper scooper, cause it's again talking shit.
I'm sipping on Tanqueray with my mind on my money and my mouth full of ganja. R-A-G to the motherfucker of E. Back with my evidence and double O-P.
Yeah, and you don't stop.
Raging the fact that it's begun to rock.
I said yeah, and you don't quit.
Hey, yo, rage with your bass, drop some gangsta shit.
Roughness post up with my afro puffs, handcuffed as I bust off the tear and shut. Oh, what did you think I did never think I would be the one to make you blink? I'm catchy like pink eye. Never will there ever be another like me. You can play the left, cause it ain't no right in me. Out the picture, out the frame, out the box, I knock 'em all. Smack 'em off the floor like a friendly game of baseball. Grand slam, yes I am. Kicking up dust and I don't give a fuck. I that lyrical murderer, pleading guilty. You know from my skills I'm about to be filthy. Large, rage in charge. You know what's happening, don't try to play large. This ain't no rerun, be hunt. Don't you wanna be one? The pepper, wait your wreck ya. Cause I never kick my vocals ain't loco. Coaster, loco. I make 'em go cuckoo for my cocoa. Puff and stuff, hey yo, Snoop, you're rough. Let these niggas know that niggas don't get
This is just a small introduction to the G-Bone era. Every day of my life I take a glimpse in the mirror and I see motherfuckers trying to be like me. Ever since I put it down with the D-O-E.
Home at the mouth and wagging his tail, searching through the yard with a keen sense of smell, looking for the chickens in heat. And when he finds her, he'll be sniffing her seat. We travel in packs and we do it from the back. How else can you get to the booty? We do it doggy style. All the while we do it doggy style. Yo, motherfucker, he put the fleas off the bitch, he shake the ticks off his and in a booty, he buries his motherfucker bone. And if there's any left over, he roll over and take a doggy bag home.
That's me.
Damn, that Tanqueray is talking to it again.
I ain't fully sure what y'all do.
Gotta got pissed.
Breath test.
Can we get a mother?
Domino, look up what's happening.
Nigga, eat a dick, nigga. Don't break my mouth.
Okay, what they talking about? We got big booty, man.
He ain't busting on the. Hey, yo, what's up with them niggas?
Yeah, gotta say what's up to my nigga like Rick. For those that don't like it, eat it. But for those who with me, sing that ish. Has it go a little something like this. Lordy dotty, we likes to party. We don't cause trouble. We don't bother nobody. We're just some sucking on the mic. And when we rock up on the mic, we rock the mic.
We'll be starting just in about 5 minutes.
Keeping y'all in health.
This is
Just to see you smile and enjoy
355.
yourself.
We'll
Cause
start
it's
in
cool
just
when
about
you
5
cause a
minutes.
cozy condition in which we create. Cause that's our mission. So listen close to what we say, because this type of ish happens every day. I woke up around 10 o'clock in the morning. I gave myself a stretch up, a moaning, yawning. Went to the bathroom to wash up. I threw some soap on my face and put my hands up on a cup and said, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the top dog of them all? There was a ruffle-double. 5 minutes it lasted. The mirror said,
You are, you conceited
Hello,
piss.
it's true. That's why we never have no beef. So I slipped off my khakis and my gold leaf. Use oil of LA cause my skin gets pale. And then I got the foul for my fingernails. I'm true to the style on my behalf. I put the bubbles in the tub so I can take a bubble bath. Clean, dry was my body and hair. I threw on my brand new doggy underwear. For all the bitches I might take home, I got the Johnson baby powder and cool water cologne. Now I'm fresh, dressed like $1,000,000. Threw on my white socks with my all blue chucks. Stepped out the house, stopped short. Oh no, I went back in, I forgot my, wasn't it? Then I dilly, I ran through I bumped into this smoker named from the. This was a girl playing hard to get, so I said, what's wrong? Cause she looked upset, she said,
It's all because of you. I'm feeling sad and blue. You went away. Now my life is filled with rainy days. I love you so. How much you'll never know.
was I to do? She's crying over me and she was feeling blue. I said, don't cry, dry your eye. And here comes your mother with those two little guys. Her mean
We're
mother
going to be
steps
starting
and
in
says
just
to
about
me,
4 minutes.
Dick Sally in the
CMSC
face and
355.
punched her in the
Talk to y'all soon.
punched her in the belly and stepped on her feet. Slammed the child on the hard concrete. The stick was strong, the kids was gone. Something was wrong, I said, what was going on? I tried to break it up, I said, stop it, just leave her. She said, if I can't smoke none, she can't either. She grabbed me closely by my socks. So I broke the hell out and I grabbed my sack of rocks. But they gave chase, they caught up quick. They started crying on my shoes and grabbing my kids and saying, why don't you give me a play so we can break it down the Long Beach way? And if you give me that, okay, I'll give you all my love today. Doggy, 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 can't you see? Somehow your words just hypnotize me. And I just love your jazzy ways. Doggy, dog, your love is here to stay. And on and on and on she kept going. The shit been around before my mother's born. I said, cheer up, so I gave her a hit. I said, you can't have me, I'm too young for you. Shit. She said, no, you're not. Then she starts crying. I says, I'm 19. She says, stop lying. I says, I am. Go ask my mother. And with your wrinkle is so I can't be your lover. Yeah, tick tock, you don't stop. And to the tick tock, you don't quit. Yeah, tick tock and you don't stop.
Alright, we're going to be starting here in just a few minutes. CMSC 355. Talk to y'all soon.
Of the sea, back to the block, Snoop Doggy Dogg, funky, yes, the doc went solo on that ass, but it's still the same. Long Beach is the spot where I serve my cane. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me, but don't lose your grip. 9 trizzies, the years there for me to hook up your shit. So I ain't holding nothing back, and motherfucker, I got 5 on the 20. It's like that, and as a matter of fact, cause I never hesitate to put a huggin' on his back.
Yeah, so keep out the manuscript. You see that it's a must we drop gangsta.
What's the name? Yeah. It's the bow to the wild, creeping and crawling, Yiggy yes yo, and Snoop Doggy Dogg in the motherfucking house like every day. Drop this shit up like Mr. Dr. Dre, like I said, so they can't with this. And niggas can't go fuck that. This shit that I drop, cause you know it don't stop. Mr. 187 on the motherfucker cop. Tick tock, now with a Glock, just some nuts in the cock. Robbing motherfuckers, then I killed them blood.
Alright, we're gonna get started in just a second here. Welcome to CMSC 355. Hope y'all are having a great Wednesday. We're gonna go ahead and get started here, so I'm gonna have to turn down the music. Hope y'all enjoyed the tunes. A little bit of old school for you today. Now let's go ahead and get started with class. Alright, cool. Hope y'all are doing great. Welcome to CMSC 355. Today we're talking about Solid Design Part 2. Last time we talked about Solid Design Part 1. Today we're continuing on. A few announcements before we go ahead and get started here. Now, first announcement. We will be doing a class activity today. Go grab your friends, text your friends, whatever. Let them know, hey, we are doing a class activity today. It's not going to be turned in today, but it is something that will eventually be turned in by next Friday. So it's something that you're going to want to be here to do. We're going to do that right in the middle of class. So again, text your friends, tell them to get on the stream so that they don't miss it, so you don't have to explain it to them. You know, let your group mates know. So again, doing a class activity today, not turned in today, but turned in as part of your next deliverable. Speaking of deliverables, the next project deliverable will be due not this Friday, but the Friday after, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but it is essentially, you can see right here, you're going to have to prove that you have continuous integration set up. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that is in case you're not quite sure. And you're going to have to prove that you have unit tests running. Again, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that is and what I mean by that. These two things submitted as a group is what's going to be due next Friday, okay? So just so you know, that's coming up. That is your next deliverable for this class, setting up continuous integration. You may ask, how is that to integrate with all these great commits and stuff I've been doing? Well, don't worry, we're keeping an eye on those commits. In fact, those commits will be kind of wrapped into that grade right there. So keep on committing. Remember, your number one way to get an A in this class is to continuously and regularly commit to your project. That is the best way to do well in this class. I assure you, if you do that, you will probably get a good grade. Finally, in announcements, midterm grades are being posted soon. These are not super important in general, except for those of you that want to have a clear barometer of kind of where you're at. I mean, you can already see it in Blackboard, and on Blackboard you can already see kind of where you're at. But in general, this is a good time to kind of take stock of what's going down, figure out where you stand, and figure out what you got to do, what you got to do to make it happen. Now, there's a comment in the chat that says, but you told us earlier that testing was optional. Testing is still optional. I'm not reneging on that. For this one assignment, you have to have one example test. It doesn't have to be a real test. It just has to be one example unit test. So that you do have to write one very trivial test for this particular deliverable, but it's not going to take you very much time at all. All right, again, midterms will be posted by the end of this week, and they should just give you a good idea of kind of where you're at and use that to figure out what you got to do for the rest of the semester. All right. Last time we talked about solid principles. Those are kind of how we think about the principles we use to write object-oriented code. For instance, we talked about the single responsibility principle. Can somebody in the chat explain the single responsibility principle to me? Single responsibility principle. Try and explain that in the chat. Let me know. What do you think the single responsibility principle is? Hit me up in the chat. I'm willing to wait. One class should do only one thing. Thank you, W. Coleman with 3 in the middle. Excellent work. Now, let's go for the open-close principle. Can anybody let me know what in the chat, what you think the open-close principle is? Open-close principle. Open to what? Close to what? Let me know what you think the open-close principle is. Right there in the chat. Where are all my eager beavers at? We got one that's already helped us out. One person that may have multiple accounts watching on this stream. Excellent work. Open for extension, close for modification. Open for extension, meaning that we can make subclasses. Close for modification, meaning that, you know, we don't necessarily want to have to change the actual code of that class. The Liskov substitution principle. Who can let me know what the Liskov substitution principle is? It is also related to object-oriented programming, subclassing, for instance. Let me know in the chat. Liskov substitution principle. Ding, 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 ding. Thanks, Pratik. Excellent work. Should be able to put a subclass into a superclass's place and have it still work. That's exactly what that is. So we talked about these beginning of the solid principles last week. The S, the O, and the L of solid. Today we're going to talk about the I and the D. We also mentioned a few things regarding good method design. Specifically, we mentioned SOFA, where the methods should be short, do one thing, have few arguments, and a single level of abstraction. I think those are pretty self-explanatory, except for the single level of abstraction. that means that we should kind of not mix like very low level computation with high level computation. Like if you are in a method, if you're going to call several other methods that are substeps, that's good. Just call method A, method B, method C. And that they're all kind of at the same level of abstraction. Now, something that would be mixing levels of abstraction is if you called method A, then you did some intense little math computation right below it, and then you called method C, right? Because then the calls to the methods are there at one level of abstraction, you're calling a method, and then all that intense low-level math computation is another level of abstraction. All right, anyway, I spent too much time on that. Hope you get it. This time, we are going to be talking about the I and the D in Solid, and that is the interface segregation principle and the Demeter principle. That is the I and the D in Solid. That's what we're talking about today. For instance, we are going to talk a little bit about inversion of dependencies. This is where, for instance, let's say we had a session manager and it depended on a database, but we didn't want to have the session manager and the database so tightly coupled, meaning that the implementation of the session manager referred directly to this database. That's, we didn't want that. What we wanted instead is to be able to change this database at any time to a different kind of database, or even something that's not a database to store our data in. So what we do is we would create an interface, and then we would have that database implement that interface. But then we only need to know about the interface. We don't need to know about the actual database. We can replace this thing at any time, and this session manager does not need to be updated. Just to look at that a little bit closer, one thing to note, this arrow is wrong. The arrow should be facing that way. This DB storage manager implements this interface. The session manager has an instance of the interface. The DB storage manager implements that interface. And this DB storage manager has an instance of the database. You could go ahead and replace that database with anything else. And you can see now that we have very well separated this from the actual implementation right here. Okay, so this is how we make sure that the session manager is only dependent on the interface, not on the actual implementation of the storage device. All right, so that's one way we can go for dependency injection. Another way is kind of through the adapter pattern. And this, let me explain this in a sec, is useful. The client wants to use a service, but they actually want to use a service that kind of encapsulates several different services. Let's take a look at this. For instance, let's say you're a customer and you have an email list, and you want to email out a bunch of different email lists, a message to a bunch of different email lists. Now, you might have a MailChimp email list, or a Constant Contact email list, or many other different types of email lists. But you don't want to go through yourself as a customer and talk to this list and that list and that list and that list. What you could do instead, kind of using this facade pattern, you could have something that just talks directly to one class, and then this itself could encapsulate several different classes. Okay, so this is kind of our facade, and it handles talking to the many other different classes, and it unifies them into one facade. Okay. So if you had a bunch of different email lists, you could interact with just this particular class, and then it would interact with Constant Contact and with MailChimp and with everybody else. All right, so that's dependency injection. As an aside, just because this came up the other day, we're going to talk about one other useful design pattern, which I want to mention, and that is the singleton. Singleton is very common, especially in UIs, because you usually only have one of your UIs, like one main widget, one main page, one button on that main page, etc. So it's basically the idea that you want to have access to that one thing without, in an easy way, let's say. So we could, of course, have a static class, a class with no state inside of it, but that's a little confusing, and we actually want to have some state inside of that object. So what we can do is we can have a class, just a normal class with state inside of it. Everything's normal, except that class also holds an instance of itself, and that is the only instance of that particular class in our entire thing. How does that look? For instance, let's say you had a class called site structure. It's just a normal class. You initialize it here. It has a bunch of normal things going on down here. But here you might have a public static get instance, which returns an instance of this thing itself, right? So you can always get an instance of this particular class because it's the only one in your system by calling get instance right here. Now, I would normally say by show of hands, but nobody's in class right now. So let's say by show of like, yes, who has ever used a singleton design pattern in your code? Let me know in the chat who has ever used a singleton design pattern in your code. Let me know by saying yeah or something similar. Let me know. So far, 1 out of 64 people have used a singleton design pattern too. There's got to be a few more than that. I know at least 3 of you have. Who else has used a singleton design pattern? At least 3. Good to know. All right, so several of you have, and some people haven't. For those of you that have, I want you to think about it. Is this design pattern actually thread safe? And do you know what thread safe means? Is this thread safe? And do you know what thread safe means? I want you to think about this question for a minute, and then we will discuss. Is this class thread safe? And do you know what thread safe means? So, in fact, this class is not thread safe, or I don't believe it's thread safe. I haven't gone through the nitty-gritty of it, but oh, sorry, I was supposed to do it this way. Is this thread safe? How about this? I want to re-ask this question. Do you think this class is thread safe? Obviously, you know it's not, but what do I mean by thread safe? You know, put your answers in Menti like right here. And why do you think it's not thread safe? Or, you know, what do you think thread safe is? Why do you think it's important? Do you think it's important for a singleton pattern to be thread safe? Give me some answers that let me know whether you guys and gals know what the heck thread safe is and what I'm talking about here. All right, we got 2 people out of 62 responding. That is kind of lame. Why don't you guys and gals get in there, type away on Menti 3972015. I'm willing to wait. And I want to see what answers, you know, I need to understand where y'all are at in terms of understanding so that I know what to say next. So, hit me up with answers so I know kind of what your understanding is. All right, so here's a little hint. 2 threads could simultaneously try and operate on the same object, leading to unexpected behavior. That's true. I know. All right, so that's great. I'm getting an idea of what y'all, what understandings you do and don't have. Thank you for answering. 14 of you out of 62. The rest of you, get it together. Make sure you answer next time. So the point is here, when we have a multi-threaded program, meaning there's just more than one thread of execution, there's more than one thing going on at a time, can you still use this class and not have any problems? And usually what happens in singleton patterns, I didn't check this one. It's very unlikely, but it is possible that you have 2 people call the get instance class pretty much at the same time, And if your class is not thread safe, it is possible that a null is returned instead of the actual version of the get instance. So just in case you want to implement a singleton pattern in a thread safe way, I want you to check this out. How do I copy this? Check out this answer on Stack Overflow. There's a very easy way to do this. We're going to look at it very quickly. I believe this is right because it comes from Joshua Blasch, the author of Effective Java Reloaded, or Effective Java. He says you can just use an enum, and this will provide you with a thread safe instance. So an enum with an instance variable, and that will allow you to have a thread safe instance. Now, this may all be a little too much information for some of you. Don't worry about it. I just wanted to point out that there are, when you start programming, especially professionally, you got to start worrying about a lot of details that you maybe don't care about. And there are a lot of good books that will help you start to at least understand these details and, decide whether you want to care about them. One of the books that I personally actually recommend, I don't recommend very many books at all, is this Effective Java book. And the reason I recommend it is because it really opened my eyes personally into kind of some of the behind the scenes things that are going on with Java that actually do affect your programs at runtime. So it's a good thing to read just to have an idea of like, oh yeah, some of these nitty gritty details that I don't care about actually do affect performance and do affect things a lot. So something to check out. It's in the slides. Check it out. All right, that was a major sidetrack, and we're going to continue on with major sidetracks now, as I would like to show you today how to add GitHub Actions to your project. We will get back to the solid lecture right here at the end, but today I want to show you guys and gals how to use GitHub Actions to add continuous integration to your projects. Are you ready? And do you understand what we're doing? We are now going to use GitHub Actions to add continuous integration to your projects. Let me know in the chat if you have any idea what I'm talking about. In the chat, let me know, does anybody understand what I am talking about? All right, so nobody knows what we're talking about so far. Well, actually, one person thinks they do. I'm going to wait for a couple other answers. I can wait longer than you guys can, so let me know. All right, good. So we have a mix of some people being familiar with this and not. This is a very cool concept that I think is important. It's super simple, guys and gals. It's super simple, but it's really powerful, okay? Here's the concept. Continuous integration. All it is when you commit something, the system will automatically build your project and will automatically run your tests, okay? Continuous integration might even take it further, like if it's a website, it might deploy it, or if it's an app, it might deploy it to the App Store. But let's just go for the fact that you commit some code to your repository, and then by commit, I mean you push it to the remote repository on the server. At that point, the system figures out that you've committed, and it triggers a build, and it verifies that the code that you committed actually builds. And if you set it up correctly, you can even have it run tests. So after it builds, then it will run the test, whatever test you have on the system. And can anybody guess what this does for you? Why would you ever want to do this? Why would you ever want to do this? Hit me up in the chat. Who would ever want to run the build every time you... Why would you want to do that? Let me know in the chat. Why would you ever want to trigger a build on the server whenever there is a commit Yes, there we go. So somebody's saying some good answers here. Sometimes we all commit something that's broken, okay? Even the best of us, the best developers, you don't want to. It's very bad to do so. But we all accidentally at some point are going to commit something that's broken to the server. And what's going to happen then is your teammates are going to pull that change into their own workspace, and they're going to hit build, and they're going to be like, well, what the heck? It's broken. I can't do anything. Like, somebody broke the build, and this is a bad thing. You don't want to be the person that broke the build. So what happens when we set up a continuous integration server? I commit something to GitHub. If it does not build on the server, meaning that it's broken, it will immediately email me, and I will see in my email very quickly, oh crap, I broke the build. I better go fix it quickly before anybody else notices. Okay? That's all continuous integration is. It's building on basically on somebody else's machine, the server machine, so that you know very quickly whether something has gone wrong. Okay, how many people have continuous integration set up on their projects right now? Anything like automated build or automated testing or anything like that? Anybody, let me know in the chat. Does anybody, or let me know by hitting the heart here right in Minty. Does anybody have automated builds set up? Anybody have automated builds set up? No is a perfectly fine answer. Let me know right in the chat. Yes or no, do you think you have automated builds set up? All right, we got 61 people on the stream. Somebody else hit me up in the chat. Show me that you know how to use a computer, or click on the heart. Yes or no, do you have automated builds set up on your actual project? All right. Looking like most of you, this is no. Okay, good. We're going to learn something today then. Here's what we're going to learn. This is what y'all are going to do as today's class activity. Check it out. You are going to use GitHub Actions to create a continuous integration setup for your project. Now, here is a project that I have forked, okay? So this is not really my project. I've just forked it, meaning I've created a copy of this project on GitHub. It's just a simple Android app where you can like make jigsaws. It's not really important what it is. It's just important that it is also an Android app, just like the ones that y'all are building, okay? Now, if I want to create a continuous integration for this, check it out. I go to Actions, and I can go ahead and hit New Workflow. You should probably watch what I'm doing here because you're going to have to do it yourself in a sec. New Workflow. And I can find very easily the Java with Gradle, and I just say set up this workflow. All right, I'm just going to call it exactly that. I'm going to commit it, and oops. So I've already done this once, and it is already set up. So I guess I'll just call this Gradle 2. Shoot, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to do something really quick to delete that file. Where did I have that? Sorry about that. All right, new workflow. Set up this workflow. It's in workflows. All right, I'm going to go to this workflows, and I'm going to delete that file so that I can just create this again. You can see I did this once already. I'm just deleting this file so you guys can see this happen from the beginning. Okay, sorry. Now we're restarting. Hit Actions. Hit Actions. Hit Set up this workflow. Now we have this file. This is just telling us how to run things. And I can go ahead and start commit and hit commit. All right, so now that's committed. I have an action that is create Gradle YML. And you can see it has now been queued as a job, and it is now actually even in progress. So with that simple click, I've set up something that is running. Let's look at what's actually happening. By clicking on it and clicking on build, I can watch what is happening right here in the console. Okay, you can see it's going to download a bunch of things. We're just going to kind of watch it happen here together. So what's happening now is it's building on the server. It has to download a bunch of dependencies first, and then it'll build, and it'll let us know whether it was successful or not successful. Okay, so we're going to sit and watch it. I think it takes a couple minutes. The interesting thing is how easy this is to do with GitHub Actions. Okay, this used to be something where you would have to set up your own server or connect to a third-party service and connect it to your repository and tell it the password to get the code and, you know, set up all kinds of mess. Now GitHub in particular has done a great job of integrating this very common task all together in Actions for you. So it's super trivial to do. This is similar to the field of GitHub, of DevOps, okay? DevOps is kind of making development and operations integrate together. And this is the kind of thing that somebody that's in DevOps might do. Somebody's asking, does everyone have to do this or one person does this? Okay, this is something that you probably want one person to do from your team. However, you know, you can all set one up. It doesn't really matter. If you all want to have practice with it, go for it. And you may have to name your Gradle file differently. So it's up to you whether you want to get practice doing it or not, but you just need to set this up once per project. Somebody's mentioning that their build failed, which is honestly, like, that's interesting lesson for you. Like, that could happen for sure. And that's something that you want to know about. So you can see that my my build actually passed. I'll show you right here. Build successful, and it's done some cleanup, and I believe it's now passing. All right, check it out. You can see it is now passed. 3 minutes ago, took 2 minutes and 30 seconds, it passed. Great. Does everybody understand that so far? Now check it out. I'm going to do something devious. Now I'm going to go to my Java code, and let's do something like this. Let's go right in here, and here's a file, and I'm going to edit it, and I'm just going to put some garbage in here, like this. Okay, clearly this is not going to compile, and this is going to be a problem. And so I'm going to go ahead and commit this. This is going to be a breaking change. Who can tell me in the chat what is going to happen now? Who can tell me what's going to happen now? I've just committed a change to the server. Who can tell me what is going to happen? Let me know in the chat. What do you think is going to happen now? I've just committed a breaking change to the server. What's going to happen? Let me know right in the chat if you have any idea what you think will happen now that I've committed that change. Looks like we're getting some good guesses. Here we have it is running the build. We can watch it again. It has triggered that build automatically. Notice that I didn't do anything to trigger that build. I just committed. And you can see things happening, lots of downloading. Let's see. More downloading. So far, it's looking very similar to the way it did last time, which is good. It should be running the same process. But at some point, I think you will notice that it diverges from what happened last time. See how long it takes for the server to figure this out. Oh, there we go. There we have it. You can see my build has failed. Oop, and now it's doing some kind of post-job cleanup. And now when we go back to my actions, you can see that I now have a breaking build. And if I were to bring up my email, you would see that I've got an email from the server and it says like, yeah, you broke the build, man. So let me find that code again. What I would actually want to do is come back here, go into the database. I'm gonna fix that code, delete that craziness here, and I'm gonna commit my change, fixing changes. And now when the build runs, you'll see that it will be passing. I'm not gonna sit here and watch it pass again. This is how you set up your actions to run builds automatically upon commit. You will do something similar to set up tests. In fact, you might be able to use the same job to set up the running of your test. I haven't investigated that myself, but that will be what you need to do for your assignment. Your assignment is going to be due next Friday. Prove that your continuous integration is set up, and also prove that unit tests are running. Now, one thing I want to bring up is that we have these commits right here, right? Where you can see that I've committed 3 times since we started this little demo. And this is where your commits factor into the grade, okay? So when you turn in this screenshot, which is just like I'm showing here, which is the same thing I'm showing here, I want you to turn in all of the commits that you've captured between now and next Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday, so I can see how many commits you and your great teammates have done between now and then. So it's important to continue committing because these commits will actually count towards your grade. All right, so that's my little demo on how to set up GitHub Actions. Remember, that's continuous integration, and it helps you know when things have gotten screwed up and you need to get back on track. We'll have time for questions at the end, don't you worry. But first, I want to make sure we have time to go over the Demeter principle. Now, switching gears, again, we're going back to solid. Remember the solid, we already talked about the SOL and I, but we so there's a question I want to address really quickly. You can set up that build to work on different branches, okay? So you can set up that build to work on different branches. So make sure you set up that build on a branch that shows me some regular commits, okay? So make sure you show that build working on your development branch. It can be either your master branch or your development branch, but I do want to see some action on that build. All right, so back to the solid principles, SOLID. We talked about them all except for D, and that's what we're talking about now is the Demeter principle. This is the idea that a class should only know about the methods of other classes, not what's going on inside of the other classes. That is, you probably shouldn't be doing anything to getter methods. You shouldn't use a getter method and then like do some actions on it. In practice, you basically only talk to your friends or classes that are very close to you, not to strange classes. And you only call methods on yourself, your own instance variables, or parameters passed to the method. You don't do things on the results returned by these. Now, that's a little abstract. Let's look into that a little bit. For instance, there is this idea of train wreck code where you get code that looks like a bunch of couple of train cards, right? Like context.getOptions.get scratched here, .get absolute path. This is not great, right? This is kind of violating Demeter. You don't want to get options and then get something and then get something. At this point, you're dealing with the internals of a class that is probably pretty far away from you. So I would say this violates the Demeter principle if we consider these options and file as objects, not as data structures. we could fix this rule by adding a delegate method to handle this case. For instance, we could add more functionality to the class, but it's better if we did something like this: context.getOutputWriter. So instead of getting the path here for the output directory, we're actually changing semantics of the functionality. We're getting a writer that we can write to directly, okay? So we don't have to go to some other foreign class and get the path. We actually just ask somebody for the writer. It knows the path. It doesn't have to tell us about the path. It keeps its own information to itself, the path, and we go ahead and write from where we are. Okay? So this is just the idea. You don't want to know about other people's business, like their paths or whatever internal data they have. You just want to do your thing. So try not to use getters, and especially chains of getters, to get up in other people's business. Hope that makes sense to you. Are there any questions real quick on dependency inversion or Demeter rules that we've talked about today? This is the I and the D and the solid. We're going to have time for lots of questions at the end. So don't worry if you have general questions. But if you have questions about this dependency inversion or the Demeter rule, hit me up in the chat right now. Dependency inversion or the Demeter rule. Let me know if you're confused about these. I'll give you guys and gals just a minute. Okay, looks like we're not getting any hits on that, so let's go ahead and move on here. So one thing I want to touch on today, we're going to talk a lot about this in the future, is there are, in fact, a lot of design patterns. And this is an idea that there's a common way to solve certain problems in code. We call these design patterns. And somebody back in the day created a book of design patterns, or the most common object-oriented design patterns. And this was a really influential book that everybody, figured out, hey, this is a really great way. I don't have to resolve these problems. But it's kind of gotten a little bit out of control, let's say. The original design pattern book was great. It gave us some common solutions. Now there's a whole, just unlimited design patterns that you could find online. There's tons and tons of different design patterns. There's pattern-oriented software architecture, parallel design patterns, patterns in game design, Android patterns probably. There's a lot of design patterns, okay? So it's gotten a little bit out of control. We're going to talk about some of the most popular ones in the future. But I wanted to touch on a little bit, like, the difference between really planning up front and then working in a more agile way. So if we're going to do big design up front or plan and document kind of things, we're going to really plan out all the design patterns that we're going to use. At the very beginning, we're going to design our system. We're going to have full UML design of the entire system, full class diagrams before we even get started. Identify all the relevant design patterns and go for it. In the Agile approach, we're going to still keep design patterns in mind, but we're basically going to want to code it, just in the most straightforward way possible, and then refactor it so that it's not violating design principles according to Solid, and we can look for some opportunities to use design patterns in that context, either in the refactoring time or during the initial design. But we don't necessarily need to have every design pattern that we're going to use mapped out ahead of time. Just as you see code getting weird, then you should think, hey, this is a problem that people have probably faced. The code is a little weird here. I should probably look into a design pattern that can help me fix this commonly occurring problem. All right, so just one other thing to keep in mind about Solid. Solid is not an absolute, meaning it's not like a set of principles that absolutely have to be followed at all times. it provides advice. It's like it's like a mentor that is there with you all the time. It's something to keep in mind, can help you know when it might be time to refactor code. But it can also be overused, right? So you have to be careful. You don't need to be absolutely crazy about how clean your code is. You just need to be reasonable, okay? So just keep solid as design principles. Keep your code as clean as you can, but don't necessarily go overboard. You also need to make progress as well. So today we talked about solid again. We specifically talked about injection of dependencies and some inversion of dependencies, and the Demeter principle, don't look at other people's data structures. We just touched a little bit on design patterns. Basically, they exist. We touched on a few in the context of injection of dependencies, but we're going to talk more about these design patterns coming up. Okay, so we just touched on these design patterns. It's an important concept, and we're definitely going to go deeper there. Now, that's it for the lecture part of the day. I'd like to go ahead and open it up to any questions that you guys and gals might have from the audience. And for those of you that don't have any questions, this is the official end of class. Make sure you do the in-class activity, which is getting that build set up. You need to get that build set up today because your deliverable for next week will be partially dependent on how many commits you have. Again, that is the official end of class for today. If you have any questions, hit me up right here in Menti. I'll do my best to answer them. And otherwise, I will see you guys on Friday. So let me know if you got any questions. Be hanging out for a couple minutes to see if y'all have any questions.
Now just throw your hands in the air and wave the motherfucker like you just don't care. Yeah, roll up the dank and pour the drink and watch it stink. Cause doggies on the gang, my bankrolls on swole. My stitch on hit legit, now I'm on parole. Stroll with the dog pound right behind me and up in your shit.
Alright, and some people are asking, is there a place to submit the in-class activity? That's a great question. The in-class activity, which is to set up your action on your GitHub, so that every time you commit, your project is building. You don't need to submit that today, and there is no place to submit that today. However, you will be submitting that next Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday. And that will be relevant for what you submit next Friday. So make sure you take care of it today, because it will be relevant to your deliverable for next Friday. How many of us submit the deliverable? It's again a great question. Next Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday, we will be doing group submissions. So only one person from the group will have to submit that deliverable. But we will need to see that from one person in each group. Somebody's seen the grant execute commission for Gradle W era when run the git action help. All right, well, I've never seen that before, so it's difficult to debug it from this. That's the kind of thing you're gonna need to visit me during office hours or create a meeting with me to check out. So anytime you have any specific problems like that, first of all, you're going to want to Google them first, because I'm sure you're not the first person that's run into this problem. And then second of all, if you can't figure it out by Googling, then you're going to need to try and set up a meeting with me so that we can fix the problem. Good question though. Who knows the greens better, Snoop Dogg or Tiger Woods? I would say probably Snoop Dogg, if I had to guess. Would you please give a short summary of what injection of dependencies means? So this is the idea that, let's say you have a class, the storage manager, and then you want to have it depend upon a database. Okay, so the storage manager has a database. You decide that I want this database to be able to be more flexible. So if I want to change to a different database, I want to make my code so that I can do that. So then you have the storage manager refer to an interface and the database refer to an interface. So then you can freely change the database anytime you want, as long as it continues to respect that interface. And it's a way of separating the storage manager from the database, so you can kind of replace your strategy, your low-level strategy for doing that storage. It's best to go back and look at that example that I had from class today. Regarding the assignment, the auto build will only trigger on commits on the branch or on a pull request. We all work on individual branches. Should we set up individual CI per personal branch? Absolutely. If you work on personal branches, I would strongly encourage you to set up CI per personal branches so that you can show enough commits for the delivery. Okay? I am gonna actually answer that in Slack too. That is a great question. Let me just answer that in Slack.
Damn, that Tanqueray is talking to it again. Got me pissed.
More or less that slow flow. D-O double G. Nugget. See these other fools, but you can't see me. Nugget. Slow your roll, I'm in control like Janet. The locust 21-year-old nigga that's on this planet. Take it for granted. If you want.
Great question. Now let me get back here. My group is having an issue with the workflow build. It says we need to grant execute permission to Gradle W, but I don't see how to do that. Alright, this is again the kind of thing that you're going to need to set up a meeting with me or something to check this out. I would encourage you first, though, to do some Googling, because this is absolutely the kind of error that you're going to have to figure out on your own at some point in your life. You might as well do it now when you have the training wheels of me as a backup to help you get unstuck if you can't figure it out. So, Google, try and figure it out. If you can't, come back to me. So, you said one person should probably do the build, so what are you looking for from others regarding the assignment? What we want to do is we want to show that everybody's committing and that these commits are triggering builds, okay? So, you want to make sure that you're either all committing to the same branch or that every branch that people are committing to has continuous integration. The continuous integration doesn't work well unless that build is triggered every time people commit. So you want to have evidence that CI is set up for everybody in your group, meaning it's either set up on all of their individual branches or it's set up on some kind of a dev branch where everybody commits to. Somebody asked, do we have to have a certain amount of commits by next Friday? You need to, regarding this, you need to just maintain the amount of commits that you're supposed to be maintaining all semester, and that is 2 per week. So 2 for this week and 2 for next week per person per group. So just maintain your normal workload and you will be absolutely fine here. Great question. Alright, I don't see any more questions here in Menti. Use Menti if you have the question, any more questions. Otherwise, I'm going to be getting off the stream here real soon. So use Menti if you got any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to be getting off Menti real soon.
And the fact is that some bubonic made me choke. This ain't no joke. I had to back up off of it and sit my cup down. Tangeray and up now, but it ain't no stopping. I'm still popping. Dre got some just from the city of Compton to serve me. Not with a cherry on top.
All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. I'll give y'all just about 30 more seconds to get them in. Otherwise, I'm going to hit the road. Be out the dough. right, I'll talk to y'all later. Have a great week.